What's going on, guys? In this video we're going to go over how to get started to code in JavaScript. And there are two ways of running JavaScript. You can either run it in the browser or you can run it in the command line using Node.js. Since everybody already has a browser, we're going to start with that. Then in the future video we can go over Node.js. So let's just jump right into it. Choose your favorite text editor to get started. I'm going to use Atom. Since we're going to use the browser to run our JavaScript, we're going to start with an HTML file. So just create a new file and then let's save it. I'm going to save it in my desktop as index.html. Alright, so to save some time, we're going to parse out a basic HTML document. Call this JavaScript in the browser. Alright. Next up, we're going to start coding some JavaScript. There are two ways of putting JavaScript in an HTML document, and one of them aren't better than the other. You can basically choose the other over one of them. One has its benefits and one another has its flaws in the way that if you put the script, the JavaScript, up here, it's going to run before the DOM is loaded. So if you were to select an HTML element that you have created in here, it's not going to exist unless you wait for the page to load, and that's a separate thing. So that's why some people choose to put their script tag or the script files at the bottom of the body, since an HTML file or HTML document is read from top to bottom, just the same as a script file. So whatever you choose, just be consistent over the project using the same type of implementation of scripts in an HTML file. So let's put it in the head just to show off the differences of what it does. Let's get started then. So first off, we have variables. Now, variables are basically like boxes where you put values or things inside to use later on, maybe in a function or a calculation or whatever that may be. So to declare a variable, you basically write out var, which you probably guessed stands for variable. So you type var space and the name of your variable. So let's call this my first variable. So there you go, that's the variable. And then we can stop here actually, but we also have to add a semicolon to say that this is the end of the line for our JavaScript. So the JavaScript parses that and goes on to the next line as a new line. Otherwise, if we don't, it thinks that we're gonna continue on underneath. But we could also assign the value to the variable. That could be maybe hello world, the most basic string. So there's the variable. And also, before we go on, we're going to talk about two ways of outputting data or messages solely using JavaScript without any HTML. There's the console.log. This outputs the data in the console. And the console is in your browser. We're going to show you that in just a second. Then you also have the alert. The alert is a modal that shows in the browser as well, but not in the console. It appears on top of the whole page, and it basically stops the user from using the rest of the page until he or she closes that alert. And alert and console are very important for you as a developer, because that way you could see the data after you've manipulated it, or you can actually search for bugs or faults in your code using it. So console log, it's great. I don't use alert that much, so yeah, I just use console log mostly. So we can actually start by console logging out my first variable to see the results. So after doing that, you can open up your file in your browser. I'm gonna use Google Chrome. And you're gonna see, well, a white page. To see the results, you're going to have to open up the development tools. So you can inspect elements right here. That brings up the inspector in Chrome. And to see the console, you basically tap the console tab right here, and you can see hello world. We outputted our variable. Pretty cool. Now you can actually change the value of your variable as well. So if we were to do that underneath the console, let's say my first variable is not equal to hello world, it's goodbye world instead. See if that changes anything. No, it didn't. Well, like I said before, that's because JavaScript is run or parsed from top to bottom. So first we declare the variable to be hello world, then we log it, and then we change the value to goodbye world. But since the log happens before the actual changing of the value is still hello world. So if we were to do the same log underneath here, where we change the value, refresh, you can see that it's going to output goodbye world as well. Now, variables in JavaScript, or JavaScript as a whole, is a very loose type language. You can change the variable's type at any time or any moment. So we could change this to be a number instead, like 1. That's going to be completely fine. So now it's 1. And you can actually see that the number 1 is blue. That indicates that it's the type of number in JavaScript. We can also change this to be a boolean, which is true or false. So we can set that to be true. And you can see that it says true as well. That's the same color coding as numbers, because true or false basically mean 1 or 0. It's binary. Alright, so that's the basics of variables. Now you can also use some math into this as well. So let's say we have two variables. We have variable x, which is 12, variable y, that is 15. So how do you add two variables together to get the results? It's pretty basic. You basically just add x plus y. That's the result. So let's say that z is equal to these. So that would be 12 plus 15. That's 27. So let's log out that. Z 27. Great. But what if you wanted to concatenate these two together, like you do with a string? What do I mean by that? Well, we could start by just writing out string 1 equals hello, string 2 equals world. What if I wanted to put these two strings together to build one string? Well, that's what concatenation is for. So that, let's say that's for string 3. We wanted to say that string 3 is string 1 and 2 together. That's string 1 plus string 2. That's the concatenation. As you can see, it also works the same way with math, that it when you add two values together. So if we were to log out string 3, it says hello world. You can see that there's no space, so you can easily fix this by concatenating a simple space string as well, and it builds like that. But what if I wanted to concatenate two numbers together? Because if we do it right there, you can see that it becomes 27 instead. Like so. Well, you can basically just add in a simple string in between. Now it's 12, 15, but it's still not a number, it's a string. So you could also run a function called parseInt for this, to parse it as an int, and now it's 1215. That's a bit not complex, but that's not what we're going to go through right now. Alright, so that's concatenation as well. Next up, we're going to quickly go over functions as well. So JavaScript is a functional programming language. So you use functions to build up structures, to build up your program or your application, to run code, to manipulate values or data and stuff. A function is very basic in JavaScript. You write out a function, just like you write out var. So you have a function, then you have the name of the function, so let's call it my first function. Then you have two parentheses, then you have two curly brackets. Now in parentheses, you type in the parameters, the values you want to send into the function. that could be variables or actual values like 1 or hello world as a string. Then in between the curly brackets is where the function code goes. So let's say we want to console log something inside of this function. We want to console log hello world. Let's add a like that, save, and then we want to run that. You can see that we don't get any output at all. Well, that's because the function is only declared. You never run the function. So a function needs to be run as well. So let's run my first function as well, and you do that by adding the 2 parentheses as well, like you did before, and a semicolon like this. Now you could add a semicolon at the end of the function. That's not going to be the end of the world, but best practice is not to, since if you do an if statement or a for loop or a while, they all end up like this, and it's a bit cleaner to run it like this because everything that's run inside the function is run between the curly brackets like this. Also, if I'm going too fast or anything, just please let me know. I'll slow down the next time. So if you run the function right now, it's going to say hello world, like you see. That's pretty cool. What I mentioned before is that you can send in parameters in the function, which is the data or the values that you want to manipulate or use or log or throw back to the user. So let's say we have a string of hello world that we want to do something with in our function. So we send it as a parameter inside of the function. So right here, and when you do this, you have to grab the value as a variable. So let's call this my hello world, the message. Now the message doesn't exist anywhere else but inside of this function. It's the parameter. So this parameter message refers to this first string that we throw in to the function. So if we were to do the same thing like we did before, we console log, but we console log the message, we could just, like you guessed, we're going to get hello world. Cool stuff. We could also use variables for this. Like this. Send in the message, then we get message right there. It says hello world. Pretty cool. Now we could actually change this to be something else, maybe just the letter M. That's still going to be hello world because that refers to the parameter, and the parameter itself refers to the variable. Okay? You're not too confused? Alright, cool. I want to go over one final thing with functions, and that's callbacks. Callbacks are basically functions as well, and callbacks are used to throw in a function that you should run after the first function is run. And how do you do that? Well, in our first function, let's delete that actually, and let's call function test. Let's say that. And the first parameter we send or get is a number, and then we get what's called a callback. Now let's say we want to increment this number once. I know that we didn't go over incrementation at all, but how you increment a number is basically adding 2 plus signs afterwards, like this. So that's going to add 1 onto the variable or the number. And then after that's done, we want to run the callback. Since it's a function, you need to add the semicolons, and then we might want to return back the number, like this. Cool. So when we run our test, it's a function, we want to throw in a number. So let's say we want to throw in 9, that's going to become 10 afterwards. Then we want to throw in the callback. Since the callback is a function, we have to declare it as a function. So it's a function like this. But right here we don't need to change or add a number to the function, or a name to the function. It's actually a callback. So you basically just say that this is a function and you get something back. And in this case we get a number. Then we can console log number. So to break this out, we can actually see that test is run. Test throws in 9 as well as a function that gets a number and console logs the number. The test runs right here. It gets the number and the callback. Then it increments the number by 1 and then runs the callback and throws in the number again. And here's the callback. So the return should be 10. Yay! Woo! Pretty cool. So that's callbacks. A great thing to use in JavaScript. Alright, so I think that was it. Let me know if you have any questions or anything that you feel I missed, both experienced programmers or beginners. If you want to learn anything, if you have any suggestions or anything at all, hit me up on Twitter. I'm at the MaxSandalone.